We're going to have a quick talk about reps in reserve and training to failure. So first up is reps in reserve. So how many more reps could you do before failure? So if you done push-ups, for example, and you did 10 and you stopped, I would then ask you, or you would ask yourself the question, how many more reps did I have before I would have failed? So whatever that number is, you could pick 5, you could pick 1, you could pick 10. This is your reps that you left in reserve. Okay? You will be prescribed an RIR to aim for. If you miss the RIR, you can adjust the weight and make note of it. You can also adjust your reps and then report any changes back to me so I can better program for you. Let's talk about failure. There's two types. There's technical failure first, is when you fail to perform an exercise with proper technique due to fatigue. So, for example, like we used there, the push-up. You could perform 10 push-ups, and then after that, let's say your technique changes. You put your hips up high in the air, you go real shallow with the reps, and you squeeze out another 5. Well, how good were them reps? Not very good. They were technically, you failed the lift. Okay, so you should have stopped when you had to change the technique. Muscular failure is when you fail to perform an exercise because the muscles are too exhausted. So this is different. You can actually maintain your technique all the way up to the point where the muscles could not perform the movement at all. This is muscular failure. They are very different. Technical failure is what we will use unless advised to aim for muscular failure specifically. Now, using this knowledge, we will avoid failure on dangerous lifts such as the bench press and the deadlift. Okay, because these are technical lifts and they can put you in compromising positions if you fatigue and fail on them. So we steer clear of failure on these lifts. Also the deadlift, not only that, it drives your recovery into the ground if you're failing on deadlifts all the time. And systemic fatigue will hinder recovery and lengthen recovery, so we won't be able to train as frequently. So it's advisable to not really go to failure on this lift. There's free weights versus machines here. So what I mean by that is free weights like to move a lot, harder to stabilize when you become fatigued. So you will reach technical failure with free weights most of the time before reaching muscular failure unless you are intermediate to advanced with your strength training. So what can be great is machines. Machines can be used for isolation exercises and other types of compound exercises. They lock you into a movement. So if you do approach failure, the machine won't move. You're just pushing. So it's a very good tool for going to muscular failure safely. So lastly, we'll go through some example RIRs. First one is 4 to 5. This should feel not very challenging. If you're prescribed RIR 4 to 5 and it feels really hard, that's how you know you're not hitting the prescribed RIR, because it should feel not very challenging. RIR 1 to 3 should feel challenging, should feel difficult but manageable. RIR 1 to 3 is where the majority of strength and hypertrophy training would take place. It is optimal for causing adaptations in the body because the stimulus is enough, but it also doesn't drive us into the ground, meaning our recovery is more efficient. RIR 0 means to the bitter end. So in our example here, it would be technical failure unless advised to go for muscular failure when you see RIR 0. And then lastly is RIR 5 and above, which would be considered a warm-up, but it is also very good for corrective exercises, prehabilitation, rehabilitation exercises, motor control, and also for plyometric exercises, specifically being used for power training. Okay, all of these exercises, you don't want to build up much fatigue, so you want to stay well away from failure so that your muscles can recover quicker and just practice the movements. So I hope the knowledge you've gained from this is something that'll help you and you'll use in your programming. And when you see that I've prescribed an RIR number to you, hopefully now it makes more sense for you and you know how to utilize it in your training.